So we stopped at after that we moved on to Uttar Pradesh, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, so we just take it from a little behind and just like a little recap about the progress of this group, the team. So I wanted to try and meet as many girls as possible, see them face to face, and reassure myself that all the incredible numbers and stories were real. Over the years, I had stored up story after story in my memory and shared a great many with our supporters across the world. My plan was to travel through Rajasthan and then continue on to Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh and see what had changed in the girls' lives and communities through education. In Rajasthan, from Pali, we made our way to Rajsamand, Udaipur, and then Jhalawar and Barwani. We then crossed over into Madhya Pradesh, visiting Alirajpur, Jhabua, Dhar, and Barwani. After that, we moved on to Uttar Pradesh with Prayagraj, Chitrakoot, and Robertsganj, and then Fatehpur. Bharej and Maharajganj, ending in Siddhi. We attended events that ranged from 800 attendees right up to 2,000. There were men, women, children, media, government officials, and supporters who flew in from far and wide. We also went to revisit some of our closest friends like Vibha and Andu and many others. It was the time of year when the evenings were cooler. Unlike Mumbai, where the temperatures bounced 10 degrees or so from season to season, in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh, the difference can be more like 20 degrees between summer and winter. As we drove through the districts of Pali, Rajasamand, Udaipur, and Jhalawar, there were constant changes in the landscape with brutal dry plains rising into hills and back down again. The population is very sparse, except when people are crowded into a 14-seater jeep, and we regularly saw 30 to 40 people crammed into one vehicle. The odd town suddenly appeared and disappeared again, and we knew we were in Rajasthan by the colorful turbans worn by the men. When we reached Baswara, Andu's community, on the border with Madhya Pradesh and crossed into Jhabua and Dhar, we met with deep forests. The road narrowed from 12 to 10 feet, and it seemed to me that the color of a tire faded too. Uttar Pradesh was another sharp contrast, and despite its size and diversity, was obviously a lot more densely populated. One village ran straight into the next, with no pause, no space. The roads were cramped with two wheelers, far more so than in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. And a 200-kilometer journey took almost twice as long because of the traffic. We learnt the hard way, and Google Maps was no help at all. We covered over 4,500 kilometers with our patient driver and visited all 16 districts, celebrating the anniversary of Educate Girls since it was formally registered back in 2007 December. In every district, we had similar experiences, and people came from really far places. On one occasion, 800 people descended on a village, and there was nowhere to stay. They had been invited for the Monday early morning meeting, but on Sunday night, word had spread, and additional groups of people arrived on foot and by the busload, some on the back of mopeds, as if the village was hosting a festival. Vikram called me in a panic about the need to find accommodation for everyone. It was winter. It was cold. But the panic subsided as the team pulled together. They searched the length and breadth of the village, and and ensured we took every room in every hotel and dharmashalas attached to the temples. Rooms that were meant for 4 people became dorms for 6 or 8. Our staff stayed up all night, bought bottled water and snacks, and made sure that everyone was looked after. We truly had not anticipated that this many young people with their parents, in many cases, would arrive to celebrate 15 years of working for girls' education. One near catastrophe was when a team member inadvertently disturbed a hive of bees right next to an event in progress. A dark humming cloud moved menacingly towards our marquee, where already 1,000 women, men, and children were gathered. Can you imagine what might have happened if the bees had entered and become trapped in the tent? Vikram and a few field officers rushed to seal the marquee. With a sigh of relief, knowing that everyone was now safe, they approached me, looking shocked but pleased with their quick thinking. But of course, halfway through sharing their story with me, they realized that I was on the wrong side of that tent wall. The crowd inside were waiting to hear from me, as it was me who was going to open the whole event. How glamorous I felt as I got on my hands and knees in my beautifully ironed sari and squeezed under the side of the tent, emerging from under the stage disheveled, to the surprise of all, while another set of team members valiantly continued to calm the bees. My dignity remained intact, unlike the time I was followed by a drone as I made my grand entrance to one of the events and ended up tripping and falling flat. There was also the time once when the stage caught fire. Over the 2 months of events held across 16 districts, 11,928 volunteers and 2,765 staff members were present at the gatherings. All our longest standing team members joined us, and some members, like Vikram, also hit the road with me to ensure his presence at every event. As I write, with that image of the crowds in my mind, I find it hard to comprehend how we went from meeting a handful of individuals back in 2007 to having close to 22,000 people standing with us, giving their time in the hope of finding and educating every last girl. This was the first time the enormity of our work really struck me. But this really wasn't just about the numbers. As I stood there looking at the eyes staring up at me, I wondered to myself what girls' education meant to everyone standing before me. I knew what it meant to me. I was here today because of my education. In the front row with Meena and Vikram, I saw Andu. Her education meant that she had saved her daughter's life, who had grown up to pass her class 10th exams and was then studying for class 11. The cycle had been broken. Her life had changed. Vibha caught my eye with a warm smile, and I thought about her studies, what her education meant to her. She was now working and supporting her sister to return to education. All these women and girls were now able to write their own stories. And my trip was about the stories, much more than just the numbers. Beyond the numbers, every single girl in that marquee, in all those villages we traversed, was an individual with a life of her own. Every one of those 1.5 million girls across all our state programs had a name, an identity, and now the prospect of an education. Each girl was a daughter, a sister, and a future mother if she so chose. Each girl might be a teacher, a healthcare worker, an entrepreneur, or a politician. Education meant something different to each girl. Most importantly, every girl's story began with her right and her freedom to have a voice and to choose her own path. With a decade and a half between our early days and the organization we are today, I never get complacent. The perils of illiteracy and the lack of a quality education cannot be forgotten. But we are now able to tell the stories of how education is overcoming those perils and how change really is happening, one girl at a time and one village at a time. Remember Jassi's mother, whose bank ripped her off when she tried to withdraw her hard earned savings? We now hear so many accounts of how being able to read helps women avoid such exploitation and fraud. It was widely publicized how the Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan scheme worked with an explicit goal of making India's open defecation free. By 2019, over 100 million individual toilets had been constructed in people's homes across the length and breadth of the country. The scheme involved a 12,000 rupee contribution and technical assistance provided to citizens. But when one such Swachh Bharat official came to Sapna's village, he was asking for a fee to help her family access the scheme. Sapna retorted with a firm no. She knew, she had seen the posters, she had read and understood the pamphlet. Sapna was educated and was not going to be ripped off. As I sat with Sapna and her friends on one of my village visits, indignant stories came tumbling out. Almost all of them could cite a story of attempted fraud and how being able to read had empowered them to stand up to exploitation, know their rights, and use their knowledge to push back against everything from online theft to deception in access to government schemes. Illiteracy really can be a matter of safety, even life or death. Stories that we use in our village meetings to illustrate the perils of illiteracy, like the story of the eye ointment and the tire glue mix up, are not just stories. They are a harsh reality. And the meaning of education in a medical situation is plain to see. Samita explained to me how her sister had fallen on the ground a few months back and suffered a terrible seizure. Samita's illiterate mother was hell bent on taking her to the village healer. But Samita insisted on rushing her to a registered medical facility in the nearby town. She was not going to wait for her father or brother. Samita ran to the local rickshaw driver and she and her sister Varsha made the rapid journey unaccompanied. Varsha made a full recovery, but the doctors explained to the two girls that she had been very lucky and it was Samhita's quick thinking and insistence on seeking proper medical advice immediately that meant that she survived. Epilepsy often goes undiagnosed in rural India. Access to pretenders and local unqualified healers is often easier than seeking proper medical assistance. Folklore and ideas passed down through families and communities can often mean that advances in medicine don't reach villages. Knowledge gained in school and the confidence to enter a medical facility were critical in Samita's life-saving actions. But it is quite it is still quite shocking to learn that as recently as 2017, close to 80% of women in India still had to ask a male family member's permission to visit a health center. Land and property ownership can be a complex undertaking. Remember Poonam, whose nephew stole her land in the weeks following her husband's sudden death? Grief, misplaced trust, and an inability to read forced Poonam to sign away what was rightfully hers. But on the other hand, there is Vijaya, one of the girls we enrolled in Pali. She joined me one afternoon to fill me in on what she was now up to. Recently, she had done all the paperwork for her aunt's purchase of a flat, cutting out the need for a broker, saving 20,000 rupees, earning herself a small fee by way of a thank you, and giving her invaluable experience in conveyancing and understanding property contracts. Vijaya exuded modest pride as she recounted her story, and she really deserves to be proud because studies show that 48% of young women in India are not allowed to make decisions about buying land or property. 44% are not even allowed to decide to buy a household item like a fridge. Vijaya now lives alone, is working, earning, riding a motorbike, and plans to save up for her own place. Her education has given her freedom she might never have had. Losing both parents at a young age might have thrown her out of school and into the grip of a child marriage. But when we enrolled her in school, Vijaya thrived, and her education has certainly given her the skills to negotiate contracts and embark on a path to home ownership for herself one day. As Vijaya pulled her helmet over her short, cropped hair and straddled her motorbike, the symbolism was so clear to me. Education was bringing a mobility these girls had never before seen in their villages. School opened a world beyond the village. School trips included visits to incredible historic sites, forts, temples, resorts. But this mobility also meant an ability to live independently. Because you are educated, you can travel alone, was what Jyoti was told by her mother when she had saved up enough money to visit her brother in Pune, Maharashtra. She might have assumed she would need a chaperone, but this was no longer the case. The family had saved up, and Jyoti navigated buying her ticket, traveling to the airport, and flying to Pune alone. A stark contrast to older family members whose illiteracy meant they couldn't even read the number on the local bus without help. Our recruitment of young women was hampered by traditional mindsets that suggested women couldn't move around unaccompanied, couldn't undertake the kind of work we were asking of them. Jyoti was the symbol of change. What does being able to drive mean? To a girl, working hard in a farming family means being able to drive a tractor, fast tracking days of hard labor, being able to transport irrigation equipment to the farm, and saving crops in today's unpredictable waves of heat. Collecting water can take a girl up to 4 hours a day. Where is the time to read, to study, or to go to school? With the time freed up, she can study and meet friends, and some of her time can become her own. This mobility changes a lot. Female leadership. Arohi was in the front row at one of our Foundation Day event, and she joined me on stage to share stories about her education and her local leadership. She was now used to addressing crowds, having served for 6 years as the sarpanch for 7 villages in her locality. She hadn't met her for a number of years, but one day in 2022, when we were back in Falna, we heard a cry across a village junction. Vijay Lakshmi ji, what are you doing here? We halted in our tracks, narrowly avoiding a two-wheeler as it turned the corner. As we looked back over our shoulders, we saw a slim lady emerge from a shop. She wore a red sari, her head covered just behind neatly parted hair, and a darker red bindi between her excited looking eyes. In one hand, she carried a plastic bag and waved furiously with the other to draw our attention. Our morning had started early with a Team Balika meeting in Falna. They had traveled far from villages in the block, and we had held a very moving meeting, hearing incredible stories from all the volunteers about how things were going now the schools were about to reopen after the pandemic. Vijay Lakshmi and I had left the hotel where we had hosted the team and were now crossing a busy intersection. 3 black and yellow rickshaws were lined up, one of the driver's feet protruding from where he would usually be sitting as he took his afternoon siesta. The other two drivers leant up against their vehicles, smoking beedies, and engaged in an animated conversation. We spotted a cart across the road that sold sugarcane juice, partly obscured by the rickshaws. I persuaded Vijay Lakshmi to come with me for a quick drink. Just as we tentatively put a foot onto the road, we heard a cry behind us from a store we had just passed. मैं आरोही हूँ, Vijay Lakshmi ji. You enrolled me in school back in 2010. Remember me? She hollered. She trotted down the road to greet us. Others, who were busy looking in the stores, going about their business, paused to watch us approach one another. Arohi must have been about 23 years old, but the energy she exuded was of someone much younger. We decided to all cross the street and pull up on a bench by the sugarcane juice vendor. Vijayalakshmi placed our order, and we settled into a conversation as we sipped on our sweet refreshments. Arohi and Vijayalakshmi reacquainted themselves. There were a lot of affirmations and agreements as they reminded each other of all that had passed over the decade since they had been in touch. Vijay Lakshmi and the team had enrolled Arohi in school when the office in Falna had been around for a couple of years, and we were slowly expanding the team. Arohi filled me in on her story. Having nearly missed out on an education, Arohi's enrollment in her local KGBV had all been down to Vijay Lakshmi. She was one of 5 children, and when her alcoholic father died, Arohi truly felt that education was not going to be possible for her. Looking back now, her education meant so much to her that as soon as she was in a leadership position in the panchayat of 7 villages, she allocated a majority of her administrative budget to education and specifically girls' education. Like in Andu's villages, girls' education meant a transformation in this area too. Girls now accessed their rights to freedom of movement, to freedom of speech, to marry at adulthood, to work, to rest, to get an education, and to live with one another as equals. Meeting Arohi again was one of those incredible happenstances. There is no getting away from the fact that we can sometimes get lost in our data and numbers. But when we learn of a journey that started with a Team Balika member enrolling a girl in school, and then 10 years later we witness her address a crowd of thousands and explain how she used her education for the education of other girls, we know that what we are doing is working. A new normal. As I dug into the meaning of each girl's education, a pattern of change started to emerge. And when we look at this in the context of generational change, we start to see the evolution of a new normal. A new normal that each girl provides a new precedent and a new role model. And this, in turn, empowers the next girl and then the next to stay in school. One little girl I was taken to meet recently was Ganaki. She was the youngest of five daughters. Pyari, Rupa, Gomati, and Hasi were all born to Savli Devi. And a few years later, she finally had a son, Ratan. We first met Savli Devi when she should really have been sending her girls to school. But Pyari had never been to school, and Rupa had just completed class 8 and had been at home since. When it came to the other three girls, the decision was difficult. Now, life was tough, and although she believed in education, Savli Devi was struggling, having lost her husband. And when we met her, none of her three younger girls were going to school. They had completed their fifth grade, but she was hesitant to let them complete any more years of schooling. Despite the RTE, the village school only went up to class 5. The next phase of education was going to be a challenge. It was just at this stage that Bablu, part of Team Balika, started working in their village, and he persuaded Savli Devi that having Rupa and Pyari at home to help with her baby boy and the farm was enough. It was really important for the other three girls to continue at least to 8th grade at the KGBV. So the three girls, who had gotten rather used to their work in the fields, went back to school. Gomati and Hasi had to catch up on a year or so of being out of school. Ganaki managed the transition without a break. Without Rupa as an example, I do wonder if these vibrant young ladies would have received the education they did. Perhaps she was the first role model that started a pattern. I do wonder what had changed between Pyari, who stayed at home and never enrolled, and Rupa, who managed to stay in school until 8th grade. Savli put it down to the fact that Pyari was naughty and kept running away from school. Was she naughty? Or was that a time when children, particularly girls from lower caste families, would often be ridiculed in class? Corporal punishment was still rife. School was a very different place back then. Our teams knew this family well, but there are sometimes mysteries we can't always get to the bottom of, particularly over a period of a decade. But with each child gaining a little more education, the path was forged for the next child to gain even more. Another girl we met in the same village, a friend of Ganaki's, was one of 10 children. She described her siblings to me from the first to the last. Each child gained a little more education than the last over the decade. From her eldest sister, who never went to school, to her next sister, who gained 3 years of education, a few siblings who dropped out at fifth or eighth, and finally to Paru, who was a 12th pass. Here was a family who had spanned the decade and a half since the RTE Act and demonstrated incremental change. Savli Devi crouched at the entrance to the small room on one side of the courtyard of their home where we sat. As the light streamed in, it caught the edge of her glasses and exposed the evidence of a relatively recent cataract operation. Gomti played around with her toddler, constantly adjusting her veil and glued to her mobile phone. Meanwhile, Ganaki and Hasi sat with us and talked extensively about their lives. Their education meant that the two girls had shaken off a lot of the community's expectations. Where Gomti looked very much the traditional married young woman in her red sari and shiny toe rings and bangles, Hasi and Ganaki sat comfortably in their jeans. Ganaki sported a pair of wire framed glasses and a maroon kurta. Hasi wore a short sleeved navy blue t shirt with Mickey Mouse emblazoned on it. They laughed and passed around a smartphone and busily responded to our discussions on what one needed to travel to the UK, searching how much might an air ticket cost and details about the visa. Behind the girls at the back of the room was a long, coiled up irrigation hose. The girls no longer needed to carry heavy water urns on their heads back from the well. When they needed to irrigate their family fields, they jumped on a motorbike and took the hose to the water tap, and the fields were promptly watered. Like Vijaya and Anisha, Ganaki had a driving license and wheels. She had the kind of mobility that was unheard of when her older sister was her age. She explained all this with an energy and infectious confidence. As we walked through the village together, we spotted a couple of tractors, and their size surprised me. As I recalled how Ganaki had just told me that not only could she get to the fields faster on her bike, but she could also drive a tractor when needed to till the ground or help with the harvest. There is still an obvious clash of progress with tradition in this household. While the girls pursue their BAs, they are still committed to marry next year in April on Akshaya Tritiya, an auspicious date considered lucky for a wedding or starting a business. In the past, a large number of child marriages would take place on this date. It is costly to find an individual auspicious date for weddings, so an economical way of doing it is to marry when other community members marry too. Ganaki and Hasi will marry on the same day. It's an economic decision. We quizzed the girls on their ability to access more information in the pursuit of better farming practices. They agreed that this was certainly the case. A year or so ago, they got a soil test card, and the girls interpreted the card and guidance correctly, leading to an understanding that their soil had enough nitrogen and was lacking other nutrients. An overuse of widely available urea had rendered their soil infertile. A little bit of research and understanding the results of the soil test card enabled the family to switch to gypsum on their fields instead. Steadily, over a couple of harvests, the soil and yield had improved. None of this would have happened without their education. But relying on weather updates from their phones didn't always help. Each farm is linked to the next. You can only reach your own field when your neighbors plow theirs first. The work is interdependent, tied to the rhythm of the community and its traditions. So even when someone has new information, they can't always act on it if those around them continue with age old practices. Just last year, the girls had planted their seeds at the usual time, but heavy rains flooded the field. Water stood still on the land for a long time and destroyed the seeds. The girls were just not able to stand up to the elders and change their ways. Everyone had to work together. And there was a resigned acceptance by the girls of their elders' rules and their compliant impending marriage. For my mother's sake, I just don't want people to think I am a buri ladki, a bad girl, Ganaki explained in a solemn tone. What I haven't yet told you is the meaning of Ganaki's name. Devi started off her family with Pyari, precious, Rupa, blessed, Gomti, river, and then Hasi, pure. Her, just a minute, her much awaited son's name meant treasure. But after 4 girls awaiting and wishing for a baby boy, Savli Devi named her fifth daughter Ganaki, which means enough. We had also counted and documented in our door to door survey girls whose name meant stop, fed up, sorry, or the last girl. And then I found myself sitting in front of the most energetic, intelligent, and wise young girl called Enough. Okay, we'll stop here for today and we will continue, and very little would be left over for us to do, I suppose, in the next week. But we saw many, many wonderful, very positive examples of what education has done to these girls who had taken their education seriously. And I think this is the chapter where the author is trying to convey the message about the importance of education. And I think a lot of all of you who have joined us today, many of you have come today probably for the first time and may not exactly know the past that we read of, the past of these girls or Balika Trust or Educate Girls. So maybe you might want to hear the recordings because we've got all the recording, the previous reading. So if you wish, you could do that, or you could simply read the book. So that would be good. There is a hand raised, I think, Manisha ma'am. Is that Gaurangi's hand or Dikshita's hand? Somebody's hand is raised. Does anyone want to say something before we conclude? Yes, Pushpita ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I was just saying that since we have been following this book very closely from the beginning, it's really heartwarming to see the changes that have come
Yes,
into the lives of these children. And especially what they were mentioning, that mobility can do so much for them. I mean,
yes,
from moving from one place to another, and even, becoming a village head, even the kind of impact that education has had on
absolutely.
them, and the fact that they are taking it forward and they are also giving back to the community, that
That
really
is what
really
education
very, very,
does. Yes,
very, very
really
heartwarming.
great. Very, very heartwarming. I don't know if there are people here from PYDS today. Is there anybody from PYDS? We normally have some participants. Manisha ma'am, is there anyone from PYDS? Doesn't
Ma'am, I'm not sure about
I
it.
don't think so because we've seen a lot of this happening in the students of PYDS, and knowing the background of the PYDS school would help because they're all children who come to the school from the villages and from really, really poor, backward families. But that school has made so much of a difference to its students, and they've really changed their lives and the lives of their own families. So a lot can be done uh, by means of education, and it's such a wonderful thing that all these project schools that are members of the GSA are really making a change and really making a social change. And this is the best part of being an educator. Being able to give back to society is something really lovely. It's God's work, I think. So wonderful to see so many people, and I hope you will be here next week. And I'll try my best to see if we could get the author Safeena to come and address us. That would be lovely. If she does, I will let you. If she does agree, I'll let you know beforehand so that we can meet her and speak with her. It would be lovely, right? Okay, thank you, Manisha, and thank you everybody for joining. We shall meet next week on Thursday, 5:30 p.m.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.